Europe's economy. I'm joined by Remi Piet. He's a senior partner in Embly Advisory. Good to see you, Remi. I think, we thought we had inflation under control. I don't know if this report gives us perhaps some pause to the progress that we've made over the past couple of months, because we had seen, prior to this report, some progress. How do you feel about that?
So you do see some progress in Europe, but obviously you still have a higher inflation in Europe than you have in the US. We're talking about 5% in the US, much higher than in China. That has been kind of a very slow because of limited domestic demand. But in Europe you still have a decrease of inflation today, unequal depending on one country to the other. You have very good results in France, especially. You have very poor result in the UK, and that is actually linked to the decision of leaving the European Union, shortages in terms of workforce, so higher salary demands from the population. But all in all, when you look at the European Union, it's actually fairly good results. It's when you actually look a little more in detail, this is what is maybe a little bit more worrisome, because you do see some reduction in prices, especially of the ones that don't need the use of intense energy. So I'm talking about raw materials, for example. But when you look at productive units and goods, you actually see that the inflation is well present in industrial production, and that will be a little harder to contain in the long run. That means that the high price of energy that we've seen in the past is now very much being embedded in the production system itself, and will be harder to achieve better results in the near future.
Are companies raising prices because they can, or are companies raising prices because they have to?
It's a mix of the two. I mean, they do have to have the impact of what was important and high energy prices in the past. So that actually has some repercussion in the actual end product that they're selling. But indeed, this is going to be having a large impact if they continue doing so on the capacity of the population to buy their goods. So eventually, they will have to reduce the increase of those prices. There's also a series of key measures taken by national governments, especially on the distribution sector, trying to make sure that you have, for at least basic goods, some affordable products. But as of today, you do have, as we were saying, the companies increasing prices because they have to get the price that they had to pay for energy in the past inside the price. And you still have a high level of savings in Europe, so they can, and they're actually taking advantage of this. This is actually one of the big criticisms in the UK. When you look at the left wing in the UK, targeting large companies for the still very high prices of a series of goods, saying that there's a national greed or trying to have quick profits on the population that is already strained.
Experts like yourself have told me that what's the cause of it? And part of the answer is, well, there was supply chain disruptions prior or during COVID. Then we had the comeback of no more COVID, and it was the demand we were talking about. But we also have in Europe, specifically the elephant in the room, which is what's happening in Ukraine. That also has wreaked havoc on a variety of things, specifically actually on food. And it seems to me that at least number one and number two is a short-term issue. Number three, with Ukraine, I don't think we can say it's a short-term issue because it's now been well over a year. There doesn't seem to be a solution on deck, and Europe seems to have to live with it. Now, the good news is we don't have the energy crisis disaster that everybody was thinking about 6 months ago. So you could argue that things are, I guess, better than expected?
But what you can argue is that the structural causes for inflation, high energy prices, some potential shortages in terms of food stock, those have been disappearing. Also, the impact of as we were saying, the COVID crisis and the quantitative easings that you had through the last few years, all these as kind of vanishing down. You have low energy prices now in Europe, very high level of stocks for energies, and you also have, if you look at the situation in East Europe, especially, a presence of very large exports of Ukrainian cereals, and so that's actually quite interesting to see that we're actually having the impact and the reverse impact of what we feared a year ago.
Right.
However, as I was saying, the worry is the fact that the factories and the large companies have started to have towards the end product the impact of the high prices last year, and they are probably not ready to decrease this because they're looking to be able to have a high return on investment and a high return for their shareholders. So it's going to be a political battle in the European Union. And it's not so much the impact of the Ukraine crisis anymore. It's much more an impact of being able to provide certainty into the long run, and having maybe a political solutions to the Ukraine crisis down the road will be very important to be able to ask companies to make the effort to decrease those damn prices for the population.
Remi, sometimes I feel guilty, lumping all of Europe as sort of one thing because each individual area has, I guess, their unique circumstances, but we're doing the best we can. Remi, good to see you again. Thank you.
Pleasure.